This is Pam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Nan Avant, and we're going to talk today about her composition, Nani Lahaina. And I want to thank you for being on the Pam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me today. Well, it's day here. I'm in Seattle, so.
That's awesome. We're going to talk about this song. You can see it's composing with the wind. You're the composer, and you're talking about the tragedy of Maui. We're going to talk more about it, but it's a rhapsody for violin and orchestra. So this we're actually going to play the song later in the episode, but we're going to tell your story as a composer and basically the story behind this song and how it was written and how it was actually composed and performed. So you can start wherever you want to.
Okay. So I'm probably going to go back and forth a little bit. I was invited. First of all, the recording itself is a Parma recording, Navona Recordings, and it's on an album called Symphonic Stradivarius. And it's titled that because there's actually a Stradivarius violin that was used during the recording sessions. And I'm not sure if your listeners know, but the Stradivarius is an instrument that was developed and created like in the 17th century. Mm-hmm. And there are only like 650 Stradivarius in the world. So this was an incredible opportunity that I was invited to participate in, being like, I think there was 8 or 9 of us composers that were asked to write a piece. And it was for the London Symphony Orchestra, which was the other amazing thing.
Yeah,
it was amazing. So the violinist is Davide Alogna, who's from Italy, just a brilliant violinist. And it was such an honor to be able to write something for this whole setup of the London Symphony Orchestra and him. So Nani Lahaina. Nani is the Hawaiian word for beautiful. And Lahaina is a town, or kind of was a town, in Maui on the island of Hawaii, in the islands of Hawaii. It was actually the island of Maui. And back in 2023, there was a huge winds and fires that took place in the summer, very much like the fires and winds that happened in Los Angeles this past January, I think it was. And so that was a huge thing that happened, an event that took place. And part of the recording session was that they asked the composers to write a piece about the environment. Well, when this happened with Lahaina, I was overwhelmed and heartbroken because I had actually lived and worked in Lahaina when I was a young adult, and I knew the town very well. So I felt very, moved to write something for that particular event. And so I started to work on the piece, and it takes a while to come up with things. And I usually start out on the piano because I'm a pianist, and I was a piano major in college, which I can come back to. And I started to write something, and I started to develop ideas and very musical thoughts that came in. And I wanted to focus in on the wind. That was one thing I thought, okay, this piece has got to be something about the wind, because that was the cause of the fire. They were just overwhelmed with winds, high winds. So I started to investigate, how can I have an orchestra portray wind? And my initial idea was, okay, what can the flutes do? They're way up there high. They have the piccolos that can do really high tones, and they also have the flutes that can do these cool fluttered tones, which is almost like a whirling sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I started with that. I met with a flautist, and talked about that with her. I usually incorporate talking to musicians. If I'm not sure about a particular idea, I usually take a lesson with an instrumentalist about their instrument.
Okay, so you can figure out the capability of what it's
yes, right. Like, this is what I'm thinking of. What can you do that would do something like that? So, she went, it was cool. It was great, great lesson. She went through some ideas. I had written down some sketches of the high tones I was thinking of, and she demonstrated it. And, I gave that some thought. And then I kept searching for a sound. And I started to talk to a violinist. And I thought, okay, I think he mentioned a conversation I was having with a violinist, I think earlier, that he mentioned something about you can blow into the holes of the violin. There's like these openings in the violin, they're called F holes. And he said, you can blow into that. This is done. And you can create this, wind sound. This is a real thing. So I thought, okay, let's do some more research on that. And I found some videos online of a demonstration of it. It was like YouTube. And it was she's like a doctorate of flute somewhere in Toronto, and she's created these great videos. And so she had this concert where she was doing piano, and I think it was piano and violin, and she demonstrated that, blowing into the instrument. I thought, that's a great sound. I really like that, but I can comprehend it. I play a little bit of violin. I started about 12 years ago. So I tried it, blowing into the violin, and I recorded it. And, I got to thinking about it. Meanwhile, I'm writing the music and, developing the ideas, the melody, and proceeding. So this was just one concept of the wind that I wanted to have there. So I got to thinking about it. I was getting closer. I had a few months left. And I thought, how is this going to be when I ask the members of the London Symphony and the first violins to blow into their instruments?
Oh, they got to take that. They got to want to do it.
You got to want to do it. And not only that, I think they would have to have been all mic'd up.
Yeah, how would you mic it so they could hear it?
Yeah, so they could hear it, so that it would record well. And there'd be a lot of fiddling with it, And I thought, I'm not sure if that's going to work. So I thought, okay, next idea is the wind machine. Now, I knew about the wind machine. It's a percussion instrument that's usually available in most orchestras. So I contacted Parma and I said, can you make sure that the London Symphony Orchestra has a wind machine, just in case I have to use that? And they did. They lined it up. They made sure it was there. So before I did all that, before I finished deciding on that, I had another lesson with a percussionist that I know, that I've worked on music with him before. And he's up in Bellingham. He works, I think he's adjunct professor up at the Bellingham University. So he met with me, and that was amazing. It was just, so on my website, if anybody happens to look at it, there's actually a video of the wind machine and him playing it and demonstrating it. I have kind of kept this really private. So there's like a password to get in and look at it. So if you want to watch it, somebody has to contact me. But anyway, the wind machine was amazing. So I videotaped that, and he had this idea. I said, how about he tried a drum that was like just a flat drum. And I had actually already started to fool around with using a bass drum. So my process was using, I don't know if you know Logic Pro.
Yep.
Yeah. So Logic Pro has some good sounds, and I use that, and I use like the East-West Quantum Orchestra Gold, and I used some different, processes to try, what is this going to sound like? Wind machine sound with this bass drum, because as I thought, a roll of a bass drum to have that thunder kind of deep, low sound of the wind with the high wind sound of the actual wind machine. So I had actually fooled around with that. I had come up with something. I brought my little audio track for my percussionist to listen to. And I said, this is what I'm looking for. This is the kind of thing I'm aiming towards. So got out the bass drum, and he played the wind machine. I played the bass drum and did like a little tremolo thing on it to kind of create the sound of that I wanted. And I recorded that. And that's what I went for.
It
So
ended up hitting what you wanted. You heard what you envisioned.
exactly, that's what I wanted. It was exactly the sound. So from there, that was great. Everything else was pretty much in place for the actual orchestration and the piece. The music was coming together. The violin part was, developing. Again, I asked actually on the violin, I had to ask a friend of mine who's a member of the Seattle Symphony. And I said, can you try this out? This is what I wrote. I sent him the printed copy PDF, and he went over it. And gave me a couple of hints here. You try to get it this way because it's a little easier for the violin, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my process. Is I usually write on the piano, start everything there, and then as I'm going along, when I need help with this is where I'm going, can you give me the advice? Is this going to work for your instrument? So that's what I do.
That's interesting because, like, orchestration is like, working with an orchestra, you have to kind of imagine, the different instruments you're going to use.
Yes.
And if you're trying to do things that are not traditional,
Right.
then you're looking for, new techniques, which is really cool because I'm very much into experimental music
Mm,
and, trying to see what is possible, if you can break the rules or you can do something that's not newfound sound
right.
versus like the found sound.
Right.
And,
Right.
that's like where my head's at, like things like Brian Eno, like, why can't I
Oh
do that?
yeah. Yeah.
Why can't I try this? Like,
Right.
so that's cool that you're in that mindset, which is not usually you don't think that, classical musicians would be in that space, which is really kind of weird. But I guess you can, that's an assumption made by an experimental musician, assuming that you're so traditional.
Well, there are a lot of people out there, classical wise, that are doing way more experimental than me, and they're using the orchestra in different ways. Um, they're having the instruments do very different things than the traditional stuff. So I'm probably a minute experimental, but I do actually. I think it's when I get into the percussion part that I start. If it's a piece that I think, okay, this needs a percussion that's going to do something, then something different, then I try to investigate that. And I do have a piece that I wrote a few years ago called Bijou, the Nebula. So Bijou means jewels.
Hmm.
And it was about the universe as part of a big concert that happened in Seattle. And the producer wanted us to write something about the universe, and I did it about the nebula. So I used percussion. I used things like an anvil. I used steel plates. I found
Hmm.
out steel plates were the things to use. I mean, literally, the steel plates that you drive over
Yeah,
in
yeah.
a car.
But that's where you get these non-traditional things that you try
Yeah,
that you wouldn't think about.
yeah,
People, taking like, rods and throwing them on piano strings just to get
right,
sounds, and people
right,
taking field recordings and pulling like things out of the woods, or
exactly,
breaking like an actual bottle and recording it and then putting it, onto a sampler and then running it onto a key and hitting the key, and people doing, interesting things. But that, yeah, I think it's like whatever serves the song. What I've
yeah.
always
Well,
kind of heard, like, you go with whatever serves the song. It's like what you did on the last project isn't always what you're going to do on the next project.
no, and it's good to be different. Just to try something else and give that a whirl. So yeah, this percussion is really cool. And actually, piano is considered, I think, a percussion instrument. There's
Yeah,
something about it that I don't know if it's the way the hammers
the
attack the
hammers hit
string
the
or
strings.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So maybe I'm already instinctively thinking percussion a little bit. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
um, that's
The
how
way you
that
can
goes.
attack a piano on the lower register, somebody can get the very percussive,
Yes.
like a drum type of sounds. Sometimes I get into things, and as a musician, I do it to kind of for the effect of it, of just hitting something that's made dissonant or kind of, you know more percussive than melodic,
Right.
um, and you go for that
Right.
because you're trying to get that feel. It's not always about the exact note, but the feel of what you're trying to get at.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
But I think that's
So
probably a good segue to actually hear the song,
I
you
would
think?
love that.
Let's
That'd be
just
great.
try that. So I think I got it queued up in
Let
this
me just
view.
point it out again that this beginning starts with the wind machine. So it's got a whooshy sound to it at the beginning, just for a few seconds. And it has the wind machine and the bass drum.
Yeah, it's gonna start off with that, so you might not hear it as clearly, but it's gonna build up.
Right.
So I'm gonna start it now. I love how that they hold that note. Um, is that the Stradivarius holding that?
Yes, that really high pitched note, that's
Yeah.
him. Yeah. That's, I tell you, Davide was just
Yeah, there's something about the way the Stradivarius that tone is
the
so
tone. Yeah.
is so and there's the expressiveness of it is
Hmm.
just incredible. I'll just get back to this view. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's one thing I love about like actual real like physical instruments.
Yes.
In an age where people feel like I can just do everything from the plug-in,
Right.
that there's a reason why you want to use a Stradivarius.
Well, they're alive. Instruments are, they're just, they're people playing them,
Yeah, there's
and
something about where you
it's,
can tell that's a human playing
yeah.
an
And it's,
instrument.
musicians, I feel, it's an extension of them, you know,
It's
when
just
they're,
all the skill to get to that level and to have that expressiveness that's uniquely, it's not mechanical. It's not something that you just put into the DAW,
right,
you take the plug in and put the notes on the and say,
right.
"Hey, I hit the notes." There's something about the way you're playing every note. It's like the microtonal, the rhythmic,
Hmm.
uh, it's not that are mistakes. It's like there's timing things that happen with a human.
Yeah.
If you put something into like a quantization
Hmm.
in these sequencers and all these DAW tools, it's like sometimes you don't want it quantized. Like you
Right.
want to actually play that bass unquantized.
Hmm.
This I'm gonna play it through the whole song. And actually, when I
Hmm.
record it, like I just like to go and play my Moog bass line manually for like the whole length of the song rather than throwing it into a sequence because there's a reason
Yeah.
that you want to do that. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, your machine can do it. I could just sequence it and then quantize it and try to make it perfect. But like, is that the point? Like sometimes it gets rid of the expressiveness of the musician's capability.
Yeah. So you literally play the bass
Yeah,
in the, awesome.
yeah. Well, I like playing bass and I like playing synth bass. Well, I have my Moog synthesizer bass, but I have
Right.
a real bass.
But,
And in
okay.
either, one of them is a keyboard bass, but the other
Yeah.
one's like a real bass. But there's something about like versus actually going and just doing that from a plug-in.
Yeah. Oh no, that's way different. So I think that's great because you're doing, yeah, you're making that track, but you're doing it like a live track,
Yeah, I like to live
right?
track a lot of things,
It's
because
huge. That's a
but
huge
it's
thing to
in this
do.
age where people say, "Why do that?"
Yeah,
Why go
because
and and manually play every instrument that you're actually putting into your composition? Well,
yeah,
because I have a vision and I want to do it that way.
right. Exactly. Yeah, no, yeah, it's music. And
But that's why
it's
it's great when you have like a London Symphony Orchestra taking
yeah,
your work and actually making it real. I mean, how that must feel
it
to have master musicians actually taking your piece and turning it into what we heard.
yeah, it's the prep beforehand, you're preparing so much beforehand. You send your PDF files off to them ahead of time, they get their music ahead of time. We had like an hour to record. That's it,
Yeah.
which is unusual. Usually in a recording session I've been in with orchestra, have like 3 hours. You got some time to, this is
But they're
like
on a tight schedule.
one.
They're on
Well,
a
and
tight
plus I think they just can do it. you
yeah.
know, they can do it.
Yeah, well,
And
yeah. Well, they're in that space all the time, so it's like maybe it doesn't take like even when you deal with a studio musician, like you go into a studio full of studio musicians
yeah.
and you give them it's like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, here's the bass line the guy came up with." It's like, "Okay, I can make that better.
Yeah.
I got it done. I got it. I know what to do." It's like, let's let's change the chords on this one. I think it is. Let's change. Let's change this. It's like let's change this. Go. Let's go get a real piano. Get
Yeah.
a real electric organ. Go get a Hammond B3. Hey, don't use the plugin. Go get the real B3 and go use it.
Wow. Yeah. Well, hopefully live musicians will just continue, even though we have AI and all that stuff. It's,
Well, I'm a big believer that the crowds aren't going to be very enthusiastic by a holographic AI bot.
yeah,
They'd rather see somebody on a Stradivarius. They'd rather see somebody on a bass, on
yeah,
like a like a Telecaster or a Les Paul or
yes,
like a Rickenbacker. They want to hear that. Like if I want to hear somebody playing like channeling the birds, I want to hear it on a Rickenbacker. I want to hear a bot hologram
right,
Rickenbacker. I want to see the real one.
right. Yeah. Well, supporting, yeah, live musicians and live music, that's just really an important place for us to, support.
I was talking to a live, like a band that plays live last night, and they saying they're getting lots of gigs. That I was
Oh,
asking because
good.
it was a rock band, and people said like rock is dead because in this age of like
Right?
EDM, hip hop, and kind of
Oh,
pop, it seems like it's not as big as it used to be.
hmm,
But they said they were getting booked, like they were busy for the next
nice.
couple of months. So I said, "Wow, so there people still want to see them." So that's interesting because
Yeah.
that's not what I was hearing. Other people were saying, "Oh, no, it's dead." It's like, "No, it's not."
Huh. Well, that's good to know it's not dead.
Yeah, yeah, so it's like there are
Totally.
people still wanna hear it, so that's like that's always make me feel good, and even like in
Yes.
what we just played today, I think there's a lot of young people that are showing interest
Mm-hmm.
in in things that you wouldn't think they would because
Mm-hmm.
the TikTok generation think, "Oh, they only went to the cat video. They're only into the they're only into this, they're only into that," but they're into a lot more than what you think.
I have to say, I do love the cat videos.
Well, I have a cat, so we make our
I
own
do
cat
too.
videos.
Oh, do you? Oh
Yeah,
man, some of that AI stuff is hilarious.
yeah, Mina, her name's Mina, she's like a Siamese white cat mix, but she's, super pretty, and
Oh,
she's just like she loves getting photographed, so I don't know. She's a little queen.
nice. I'm surprised my cat isn't here. She's usually on the piano back here.
But, like you said, this was part of a bigger project, the symphonic Stradivarius, right?
Yes, and they're all really, the pieces on there are beautiful. They're just, yeah, everybody did a great job. This is wonderful. So one of the things I wanted to explain, as you can tell with that piece, that it's quite emotional. It's got lots of heart, lots of feeling in it, and uh, I just want to explain why this time in Lahaina and how I got there and some cool things that happened and how I ended up to be a musician, actually getting into it more, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay. So let's see. High school happened. And I'd been studying piano since I was 7, right? So I had a great teacher in Seattle, really dedicated. I practiced a couple hours a day, got through, high school, and I wasn't sure. It was just that time of like what to do. I needed a little break before I went into music school. So my cousin invited me to join her in Lahaina to work and live there for a little while. So I had a job waiting for me. And Lahaina was a fishing whaling town built in like the 18th century? No, it was more like the 19th century, so the 1800s.
Mhm.
So little town across the street from where I worked in Lahaina was the banyan tree, which is a very, very famous tree that just grew and grew and grew and grew.
Oh, wow.
It survived the fire.
Oh, it did.
It
That's
did. Unbelievable. You can see pictures of it. In fact, if anybody knows Lahaina and they want to look at some cool stuff, there's a page on Facebook called Lahaina Remembered.
oh, I'll have to check that out.
Check it out. You can join it. And they have incredible footage there of even the fire of what happened. So, which I can come back to. But anyway, so I had this job across from the banyan tree, and near the banyan tree was a place there was a museum called the Lahaina Art Society. And I got to know the people over there, and I found out that there was a red baby grand in the basement
Mm.
of the Lahaina Art Society. And I was a pianist, right? So I missed playing the piano. I thought, I got to keep
Got a chance to play.
I got to practice, I'm so used to practicing. I can't just do my job. I got to do something with my, music. So I asked them, husband and wife that were working there. He was actually an artist, George Allen. And I asked Janet and George if I could, can we use that piano? And they said yes. So downstairs underneath the Lahaina Art Society was this old jailhouse. Okay, It was the original county, Maui, whatever jailhouse. So there were like maybe 3 cells. It was nothing weird or scary or anything. It had bars, but they used it for receptions and artwork. It was really pretty cool. And in there was this baby grand. And that's where I got to just kind of keep my skill going and practice a little bit. And, after work, before work, whatever I did, I'm not sure exactly, but I did. I used it. And so I can come back to that and continue on just where I went from there. What would you like me to do?
Oh, that where you're going is good. Keep on going.
Okay, I'll keep going. So I practiced on that piano, and later on in life, so I did that for a little while, worked at that place, moved, decided to go to music school, entered into like Cornish school here in Seattle. And then I auditioned for California Institute of the Arts near the LA area. And I got into the piano major, department. And I studied a lot, practiced a lot, the 6 hours a day type of practicing. And I did classical music and concerts. And there were some cool things that happened there. And then I continued, after I graduated, I continued. And I had been writing music before that. I had been writing music when I was a teenager in high school on the piano. I had been doing some, composing. So, but I decided to major in piano and not composition. My reason being that composition there was more very avant-garde and kind of something I wasn't doing. I was doing much more melodic, tonal, stuff that I could do naturally, right? So I did piano major, came back to Seattle, I taught, and then I finally, and then I did some playing. I did a lot of performing, like I did receptions and weddings and that kind of thing. And I worked on the Argosy cruises where I did their reception things out on the Sound and on the lakes. It was nice. And then I started to study. I found out that there was a film scoring program here in Seattle. So I studied film scoring and learned how to do short films and, write music for short films. And I learned all that technology. So I learned digital performer. At that time, I was doing programs that were essential. Yeah, it's essential for that, the DAW stuff. So I learned how to do that. And then I eventually got into, I did that for a while. I have lots of short things. I did short films and things like that I did. And then I got into writing concert music because I was invited by a producer here in Seattle who wanted to create a huge programs with the orchestra and then recordings. And she invited, certain composers to do that. And it was concert music. And I thought, this is really the channel I want to go in. Concert music uses my classical background. And that's when I started to really focus on that and then I eventually got into writing music and doing recordings with Parma. So I have a few albums out with Parma. And they're compilations with other composers. So it's something that my music appears on the album. And they're orchestral, which I love.
Yeah, so you found your space. You finally got into it. But your story kind of led you on that path to where you are.
Exactly. So the Parma thing has been fantastic. They're great. So I'm going to segue back to what happened in Lahaina. It's just an interesting story that took place. So since I've been promoting this, symphonic Stradivarius and Nani Lahaina, I contacted some of my people that I knew in Lahaina just to kind of check in with them and let them know that there's something here that's new, if they'd be interested in it. So I managed to get in touch with the wife of the artist that had been at the Lahaina Art Society. And she's living near Lahaina now, but not in the town of Lahaina. Well, there's nothing there. They're building. Literally, the place was burned to the ground.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it was unbelievable. So she reminded me about, she remembered obviously that I practiced the piano, the red piano, grand piano in the basement where the jail was. And I think I was looking for, I was kind of Googling some stuff on him, the artist who'd passed on. And she told me about a story. She said, did you know about Elton John and being in Lahaina? And I said, no, I think that was after I'd left. So apparently Elton John had been in Lahaina. Yeah, he had retired, one of his first retirements, because we know he never retires, really. He just keeps going. So he had been in Lahaina, and he was like hanging out at a nice restaurant. And somehow or another, the people there convinced him to do an impromptu recital concert, little thing there at the restaurant bar, right? So it's, I think it was probably a bar that was looking over this, the area, the marina area. So my friend Janet from Lahaina said that what happened was that they decided to use the red baby grand piano.
Oh, wow. The one you played.
Yes. Yes. The one I played. And they moved it in a truck, in the back end of a truck, hauled it. I think her husband helped. He played the piano too. He got on the back of the truck and played as it was being moved to the restaurant. And there is where it was. I don't know what happened to it after that, but Elton John gave a concert or two, or however many there are. And there's actually a write-up in, like some old paper of Lahaina about that concert. Isn't that funny? Yeah. So he played the piano, I played.
That's just cool that somebody touched the same piano.
Yes, it was after me, but anyway, it was kind of cool. But it was just a great experience. And when Lahaina was different then, it was just it was just not so big. It wasn't so big as it ended up to be.
Smaller community,
much smaller, little shops. You knew people.
Tight knit community, tight knit type of thing.
Yeah, kind of tight knit. And I did keep in touch with some people. So when that happened with the fires, it was just.
That's real emotional, because you knew that to have been in that town and known it when it was like tight knit community.
Yeah,
you feel when some kind of tragedy happens to people that
It was just, and I haven't been able to find a couple of people that I would like to find them. I don't know what's happened, but yeah. So it really, I watched that on TV, and it was just like, wow, media, all the stuff they had on it was just, it was devastating to watch that. So the piece itself is very emotional, and it was my emotional impact of what that meant to me, and how I felt about Lahaina. I didn't even know I felt that way until that all happened. It was fond memories back then, but the impact of it just really was impactful.
You can kind of feel it in the song, the way the movement of it, where it kind of has these moments where it gets soft, right. Then it builds back up, and it's kind of like it feels like the emotional impact of going through something.
Exactly.
You're feeling that. We try to do it as musicians. We try to put these kind of moments in our music to kind of express emotion with nonverbal statements.
Yes.
with the sound.
Right.
And through the pauses or the decrescendo and the crescendos and build-ups and right. Then the nature of that Stradivarius is very emotional in itself. Just like how he can hit those notes and the delicacy of it and the power of
Mm-hmm.
it in
Mm-hmm.
certain points, you're like, wow.
Yeah. Well, plus his musicianship. I got to meet him just before the recording, and Davide in Italian. It's just spoke English and everything, but he was charming, and uh, his playing was so emotional. It was
Very
just so
emotional.
heartfelt. It just, yeah.
That's the whole thing about music is like that's why it's always gonna have that human element because it's about emotion.
Yes.
It's about things that sometimes you can't express into words, and you just have to play it. And you just have to
Right.
have somebody hear it. That's where vocals are one thing, and in the space of music where you have vocals and lyrics that you can express things that way. But a lot of times there are things expressed in the notes themselves, or the
Right.
space between the notes, or how you put those notes out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's the tremolo or whatever how
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
actually engage, with that instrument and then the audience and the air itself.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
it's
just
how are you going to have it speak? How is it
yeah,
going to speak to those people? To people, what's it
yeah, it's
going to
just amazing.
say? Yeah.
Do
And the
you
orchestra.
find Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
When you wrote what you were trying to convey, were you surprised the way some of the musicians interpreted what you wrote?
I think when Debbie Day played his part, I was taken with the way it was, yeah. He got it. He
You
got
got
it,
it.
and he put even more into it. It was like, wow, this is great. And yeah, he's just phenomenal.
Does that
So
happen all the time though? That when you write and then you work with people, does it happen more often than not that people actually interpret what you felt, what you were trying to convey?
I think so, because yeah, I think I'm a really direct melodic writer. So the melody is what speaks to people, I think. They
Mhm.
feel that melody. Um, and not I can't think of any time that they didn't interpret it how I was feeling it. In fact, I did a recording session with Parma again, and it was in Scotland this past January. And it's a piece that I wrote during COVID, and it's called Soundness or Sirens of the Salish Sea. The Salish
Mhm.
Sea is right out here in Seattle. It's out there on Puget Sound.
Mhm.
And I wrote this for piano and orchestra. It's like a whole suite, 5 movement suite. So there's 5 parts to it. And these 2 movements I had recorded in Glasgow with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra and a pianist that's originally from Russia, incredible pianist.
Mm.
And the feeling and the emotion she put in that was wow.
Yeah.
Okay, you
Wow to
got
get.
it.
You're wow to get.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. So that is so rewarding when
Yeah.
when the musicians feel it, and of course when audiences feel it. That's
Yeah,
the
that's just
double
amazing,
reward.
like, when you can put on paper in the score,
Yeah.
and then it actually is and that's the reason why, notation can represent what you're trying to do,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and when you have master musicians and they read it, they get it, and
Yeah.
so as long as you've got all the dynamics, out there and
Right.
as the composer, you're actually giving them enough for them to get what you're saying.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's the prep work, is just trying to make sure that you have everything in there that you want them to take and interpret that. Like you said, the dynamics.
Is that
Then
something that took a while to get as a
if
composer? To get to the point where you actually would convey in it the way you wanted?
uh, it is kind of tricky. Yeah, and still is. Because I use Finale, which is like a software program to put in all the notes separately. I use my keyboard, and after I've written a piece, I start putting it into the program. so that I can
Mhm.
print it out, right?
Yeah.
So the dynamics take forever. That kind of a thing is like you have slur markings, you have bowing for violinists, you have loud, soft. Do I want the violins to be this loud? Do I want the cellos to be this loud? Can I? Yeah, that takes a lot,
Yeah,
and it
that's
still
like
does.
that's the details where you're coloring it, like, you really
Yes.
they're the final it's like when you I was talking to a filmmaker, and he said, "Well, I
Right.
can go out and do the shot, and then when I get into editing,
Yes.
I can really start reframing it, and that's where I can start focusing and actually changing lighting and camera angles and, moving things around to get to what to tell the story the way I wanna tell it." And it's a refinement, and there's a lot of stuff that can happen,
Right.
and it's like the final draft.
Right.
You're an author or a musician when you kinda go back over that, get into the master, you're doing
Hmm.
overdubs, you're doing all this extra stuff to, like, you're going through the processing on the preamps, and you run it through your Neve board or something. You say, "Hey, I can actually color this way, this way, this way, this way. Which way do I go?" You know?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's that's editing. Yeah, it's the same thing in writing down orchestral music. It's the editing, and it's amazing to think. I've done one handwritten, well, probably more than one handwritten score for orchestra. I'm
Mhm.
details, and sometimes it is a little bit more intuitive, and because you're just doing it
Yeah, on
by,
paper,
by
just do it.
hand, and you don't
Yeah.
have to fiddle with the program if you're doing it right or mess it
Yeah,
up.
that's a whole different age now that we can go into program, and then
Yeah.
sometimes you're like, "Yes," like, that's why sometimes I like to actually go onto a board
Yeah.
that's actually like a soundboard
Hmm.
with the old style compressors and big
Nice.
cabinet of compressors, and they're actually not digital, they're like analog physical compressors and all kinds of things, and you're routing things through all these mechanical, like, effect systems. Rather than
Wow.
doing the digital effect systems,
Hmm.
and to me, I don't know, people say, "Oh, the digital is the same," and I'm like, "It seems like the old stuff is a little different."
Hmm. Well, it's kind of like when recordings used to be, the early records were like live, you know,
Yeah, it's
they
just live.
record, there's no editing to that.
There's
It's
no
just,
editing.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
they
just
may
had,
run through a simple board and run a little bit of a compressor on it, but not
I don't
much.
know what they did, but boy,
Yeah,
some of that stuff you listen to, it's like, yeah, this sounds live because it's not perfect, but
yeah,
it's human.
yeah, you get into the '70s, you get more well, yeah, but,
Yeah,
like, you
it's
get the stuff in the '50s and the '40s, they don't have that, right?
no,
They recording it, it's the take, like, what take did they do? Versus like, did they run it through a Neve board with this compressor
right.
and this tuner and all these tape echo and they use this digital delay and they use this reverb and they use this stereo chorus. No, it's whatever they had.
Yeah, it's just wild. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different perspective, but is this the way you were able to convey the emotion in your work to tell a story? Like a lot of times, when I talk to artists, it's all about the story they're trying to tell, and
Mhm.
it's the whole thing here. It's like you're telling this story of this tragic event and conveying it in nonverbal terms,
Mhm.
which to some people might be like, "How do you do that?" They probably can't imagine like how would you do that, but like in your space as a composer, that's what you do.
Yeah. Well, and it's I think it's kind of uh part of, at least I always say that music is part of my DNA. It's kind of in you. And so when you're conveying it through notes and instruments, you're really giving of yourself. I even did when I was a piano major in college, and you know, performing is that same
Yes, that
emotion, emoting that you're
yeah.
giving of yourself. And it was a really wonderful experience to do that. I'm glad I had that opportunity to really perform classical music, and I know what it's like, to be in that kind of situation
You
and
think that
to
helps with your writing? The fact that you actually
totally,
played those type
totally.
of parts that you have an idea, like,
Yes.
how it should be conveyed, because you actually
Yes,
played it.
absolutely. Yeah. I know that what it takes, I might not know those instruments, have not played them, but I've studied them, the other instruments in the orchestra. But to understand what that is like to perform, and especially instruments that I've played, piano and a little
Yeah,
bit of violin.
I
But,
think it's
yeah,
important, because I came from woodwinds, like
oh,
clarinet,
that's okay.
flute, and a little sax. And like sometimes if I'm writing on a synthesizer, that part, well, because I played a woodwind, I have an idea of how I want it to go because I actually played it.
Yes.
And so it gives you a different like way, you have a better understanding of the canvas because you actually know the brush.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It is like that. It's a canvas. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's painting, it's the texture, and one thing I just want to mention that uh, the piece, Nani Lahaina, uh, ends with a positive note of regeneration. Even though it's that emotional stuff going on throughout the piece, I wanted to convey the message that there's
Of
hope.
hope. Yeah, kind of.
Hope
Yeah.
and healing that they are going forward, and they are going forward. That Lahaina Remembered on Facebook shows me, the page on Facebook is helpful to see that they really are going forward.
Well, it's a really interesting, movement at the end. You have the kind of high note where the note being held,
Mhm.
and feeling, well, yeah, something's coming, like growing, like you're feeling like something reemerging. I
Yes.
don't
Oh,
know.
that's a good word. Yeah.
I don't know. That's why everybody interprets songs their own lens, however they hear it. But that's what I
Yeah.
what I heard. But
I like that emerging. That's nice. So
but
it's available on Spotify, digital stuff, everything.
yeah, yeah. I was playing it off of YouTube, but yeah, it's on all the platforms.
Yep.
Um, yeah, it's just I'm very happy that you're in this space, and I hope that the people have heard this, and maybe you haven't listened to orchestral music before, and maybe that you didn't think it was your thing, but if you listen to this piece, you can feel the emotion and the power of music. In music, there's many forms of music, and I think as I tell my daughter, is like she's 25. I try to expand her her palette.
Yes.
It is show her as many things as I can. And actually, I showed her your song, and she's like, "Wow, I
Oh,
really don't listen to that type of music yet, but like I like this piece." And I'm like, "Wow, I got
nice.
her to, to
That's
do
nice.
it."
That's nice. That's good. Super.
And thank you. Like,
Nice.
I want to thank you again for being on the
Thank
Family
you.
Electric Ghost podcast. And if anytime you have another project or a record or a piece or performance that you want to talk to us about in the future, you can always come on our show and talk about something that you feel you want to convey to the audience.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Phantom, for having me today.
Well, thank you. And we were just live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on all the other platforms where you can listen to a podcast. We create some AI clips and we put it on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. So we'll try to get the message out on all the new social media that's out there and get people to engage. And I want to thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.